one outstanding abstract, Dr. Wool from the University of Pedagogy, Professor Wool, to talk to us later tomorrow, I think. So let me begin to talk to you about the notion of where to go from here. Where do we go from here? We are in a very strange place. Now, like other presentations in the conference, I will talk about the future, and I will focus on certain key terms or phrases. And I will first start with the title, and I will look at it backwards. So, number one, we are living in the 21st century. We need to be active participants in whatever processes are needed in order to create the new normal. And that is to be empowered rather than remain or feel helpless. So let me begin with some more or less self-evident assertions about the 21st century. The century is extraordinary. It really is. We've never been in anything like this before. It will probably get more extraordinary with the passing of time. The technological revolution has, in fact, changed everything. And lots of things are happening now as a result of that revolution. Here are some of the most important technologies for the 21st century, at least that's what I think. The first one is artificial intelligence. Neural networks and expert systems. So those of you who are working in that area, you should feel very happy because it will get better and better for you. Machine learning and deep learning, where the machine starts to understand, not so much understand, but is able to interact with big data and get information to allow it to make decisions. The area of biotechnology, I think, is going to be very important. And this is connected to the realization that we are embodied. I really want to stress this. I think it's very, very important. Our mind is trapped inside our bodies. This is relevant to the construction of knowledge, learning, and communication. We are biological, and we can use that to our advantage. And I have a feeling, I have no proof for this, but because of our biology, there are certain things which happen in language, such as the length of chunks in language production and utterances, which are limited by our biology. And we need to start looking at the connection between biology and things like grammar rather more than we have in the past. Now, technological developments offer the possibility of what has been called people hacking. This is a statement by a professor in Israel called Yuval Harari, and he's worried that we will be hacked by the big companies and who will use big data and little data about us for bad purposes. But also, I think, for good purposes, like health. Clearly, if we know more about the way our individual bodies work, then health will be improved. There's another problem, of course, which is that of changing work patterns. And we're likely to see an evolution or revolution something like every 10 years. So in 10 years, we might find that certain jobs disappear and certain jobs, and then you have to recycle yourself. The prediction in the United States has been that in their working lives, people will need roughly 7 changes of job. They will find themselves in 7 different kinds of work. And even in my generation, that is more or less true. We started off life thinking, oh, I will get a good job in a university, I will stay there forever in the same house, but it doesn't work out that way, even for people like me. But here's another issue, and this is called, it is the conflict between, in a sense, Moore's law and human intellect. So what is Moore's law? Okay, here's a graph. I didn't draw it. I couldn't find one, but I finally did. And on the same graph, we see a red line. The red curve represents the growth of technological power. Double the number of diodes on a sliver of silicon every 2 years, so that the power of the computer goes up dramatically. But the curves here represent intellectual growth. You can see that the intellectual growth is more or less exponential, as in the case of technology. So higher education, Van Lang University, other universities, all have a crucial role to play here. And that's why higher education is so important. Not because it trains us for a specific job that we will keep forever. We have to go with the change. We have to move we have to grow in a way that hasn't happened before. We're growing, yes, but we need more. So it's really important that we change the shape of the human intellect line, because technology opens up possibilities, not just doing what we wanted to do, but it helps us change the ways of thinking that were previously unthought of, unimaginable. And it can also limit us. Why? Well, it can limit us because it helps us to do things, but it also prevents us from seeing differences from the way we are thinking. It's a kind of gatekeeper. So let me move on to the post-COVID condition with apologies to Jean-François Lyotard. Those of you who know Jean-François Lyotard wrote a report to the Canadian government called the Postmodern Condition, which he also sold as a book. Now we're into the post-COVID condition. That's what I'd like to spend a little time on. We are all in the clutches of this invasive worldwide pandemic called COVID-19. It happened more or less suddenly and with little warning, and the world had to react quickly to avoid a tragedy of unequal proportions. It's still happening. The tragedy is still with us. Everyone is now waiting for a vaccine so that we can enter the post-COVID world, a world free from the disease, and so that we can get back to our normal lives. But beating this pandemic will not be enough, as a new one will probably come along. So I don't think it's going to happen. We already have a history of disease spreading around the world, starting with something as common as the flu, the bird flu, Ebola, AIDS, and so on. And ideally, we would have to beat new pandemics before they start. Perhaps more importantly, in addition to the health issues, and it is very important. I mean, the health issues are really, really important, of course, but in addition to this, this pandemic has triggered new understandings about how we can lead all aspects of our lives. We have already rethought new ways of living our lives. Travel, group meetings, workplaces, entertainment, education, many other things are no longer the same. We have learned to do things differently, perhaps even better. But this may not always hold, as in our pre- and post-COVID days, we have become accustomed to thinking in certain ways. And these ways of thinking prevent out-of-the-box thinking. Or to put it another way, what we know and control helps us to live our lives effectively, but does not always enable us to live our lives in the best possible way or differently. So in reality, the term post-COVID does not apply to the disease-free future we are all hoping for, but to the present, what we are living through right now with COVID. And I would argue that the post-COVID era began the day that COVID began to take measures against it. So at least for me, the term post-COVID means something like after the beginning of COVID and not after the end of COVID. And we will never get back to the old normal, although maybe for some things it will be possible. Hence the development of the term new normal. at least in the foreseeable future. In short, we are already struggling with the post-COVID condition because from now on and in the foreseeable future, all of us will have to be vigilant all of the time about this kind of disease and protect ourselves against the possibility of infection. All the time. Maybe we don't have to wear masks all the time, but from now on, it's in front of our eyes. We know that people can work from home successfully. Everybody knows this now. They didn't think it was possible before, but employers and employees now understand this. In particular, employers do. 82% of employers now believe we can work from home fruitfully. We can study from home, not for everything, for many things. We can replace travel with online conferences like today, which is not the best, but it works. And these new understandings will not change and probably will stay with us forever. So this is what people have called the Great Reset. We must reset the world in order to survive. And let me quote from something that I wrote recently. As the world resets itself and together we co-construct a new normal for life that will never be the same again, we will need more than ever to rely on the fundamental human qualities of ingenuity, imagination, adaptability, and resilience to lead safe, productive, sustainable, comfortable, and satisfying lives. Our lives should be safe, satisfying, and serene. The 3 S's. I like 3 things. I've got in my work 3 C's, 3 A's, and other things. Here we have the 3 S's. But it is becoming clear that the patterns from the past must be abandoned. We will work from home, maybe, or in small-scale, dynamically reconfigurable co-working spaces, not large centralized buildings. This is a problem for builders. We're working from home, and this is really, really central to the whole thing. Working from home creates new problems. How do you define home to manage work, family, children, pets, and balance personal and work commitments? In the past, home was the place that you went to sleep in order to go back to work the next day. Now, everything happens at home. Okay. We will telecommute, and we will probably decentralize. And this will affect everything because we will use technology to replace face-to-face meetings. And we will save a huge amount of time traveling, and we will save money in things like petrol or gasoline. One of the things that probably will happen is that schools and universities will be less people, and new community-based models of education may emerge. One of the things that this may mean is the notion that the traditional classroom is under threat. The traditional classroom may no longer be there. Every time we keep thinking of education, we have in our heads the notion that there is a classroom. But maybe this will change. And not just in the minds of researchers. Researchers knew this a long time ago. But in the minds of everyday people. But there is a risk, however, with the rise of MOOCs, massive open online courses, and what I call universal university. What we're seeing is a centralization of the power of education in people who are identified as the best. Universal university is a joke. I mean, I invented it as a joke. But it says basically all you need is the best person on earth to teach the best possible course on earth, and that's all you require. You don't need thousands of universities doing the same thing or even different things. And that's a very dangerous situation in my view. I mean, universal university is dangerous. But it's not too bad, at least for education. Although the virus is bad, it has forced us to rely on technology to do things. And what happened is that people who had never done technology before suddenly felt or suddenly were pushed into doing technology in order to teach. In the field of language teaching, people with no experience were suddenly told to design technology-enhanced language learning systems from the very beginning. And in a very short time. Let's do it in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we have to be online and teaching our English students. Well, we were. Many were. But what is surprising is that in many instances around the world, instead of looking for expert help, many decided to use a kind of do-it-yourself approach and to improvise as best they could with their old approaches. Let's just do what we've been doing. What do we know? Oh, we know something. Let's do it. Sometimes this approach worked and people felt good. I don't know what worked means exactly, but they felt they were successful and people felt good. And sometimes it did not work and people felt bad. And of course, this had an impact toward technology, which is why we're here today. Technology is not technology. Technology is not uniform. Technology is not the same. You cannot talk about technology. You have to talk about different ways of doing things using technology. And that is very different from praising or condemning technology as a global concept. But we spent a lot of time investing into these let's do it in 2 weeks programs. We spent a lot of time. We made a huge investment. We developed systems quickly. And now it's very difficult to get rid of them. But we have to, in order to move forward and phase out the hurried but important work that we did and replace it with something better or keep the bits that worked. In today's world, the way forward for higher education is inevitably closely connected with technology. You need to understand that, and we need to get used to it. It's not going away. But we do need to have a clearly articulated learning and teaching theory. This is really built into the notion of using technology. You cannot just improvise, as we often do in a traditional classroom. Oh, I'm going to walk into the classroom and we'll do a class on the present continuous today. No. I mean, yes, but you can do that, but you also need to plan how you're going to do that. And the level of planning is much higher than it is for a traditional classroom. Simply computerizing some of the things we do in a traditional classroom will not be enough. And typically, and this is really interesting, the technology will reveal flaws and problems with what we do that we were unaware of and requires us to rethink our theoretical understandings. It's amazing what trying to program a computer to do what you want it to do will teach you about the way you had been thinking before. It's called computational thinking. You don't have to use a computer, but it's called computational thinking. So now we have really a great opportunity to rethink our world, but rethinking and improving is not just a matter of opinion. Oh, yes, we all agree, we're all experts, we all agree that we need to do this and that. Okay. Typically, but it's not just a matter of opinion. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, yes, we agree. It is a matter of doing something else. When we brainstorm solutions, we need to be informed. The best source of information is research, but not research that simply repeats the past. I want to emphasize it. The best source of information is research, but not research that simply repeats the past, and that we know has failed in the past. We know it has failed because the field is stagnant. We're not doing great right now. How do we know this? Well, look at the EF results for English language proficiency. Look at the trends in English language learning in Asia. Some places are doing better than others, but we're not doing great. We need to seriously consider outliers. We need to consider researchers who are not in the mainstream of the field. Why? Because they can see things that the mainstream cannot see. It doesn't mean that we have to have harebrained, silly ideas, but it means we have to have genuine research in areas that are more risky than the ones that we normally do. We need to think laterally, especially as we are now in a mass market for language education, especially English language education, where there are millions of students, both in class and out of class, that need to be looked after. So let me give you some examples drawn from the research that my students and I have been doing at SUT. It's very short. I may have to gloss over it. And I see quite a lot of my students from SUT in the conference today, so thank you, hello. And I also see some previous and current students from Charles Darwin University, hello. But I'll talk a little bit about the research at SUT, which is the research that I'm closest to. This research has been going on since about 2014 and has resulted in the creation of what we had called the ALERT Research Group. It began with Professor Dr. Hebi, who is at Signy Normal University for Nationalities in China. And ALERT means Advanced Language Education Research Team. What I wanted to show you is to bring to your notice some intellectual frameworks. ALERT has a common intertwined framework. Right? The frameworks are: 1, verbotonalism, which is a theory of perception and production. 2nd, rhizomatic and autonomous language learning. Self-managed autonomous learning, basically. You don't have to have rhizomatic learning, and we can discuss this at some stage, but you can have autonomous learning. Self-organizing learning environments, the work of Sugata Mitra. Teacherless project-based learning with a project-based framework. Precision language education, identifying learning problems for each student, diagnosing them. It's a form of research-based personalization, and a critical epistemological framework for the construction of knowledge and learning. How do we know things? How do we learn? We need to be able to answer questions like, how do we learn, in order to be able to move forward. The ALERT group draws on technology as needed, almost always. So the work done by the group began by working in pronunciation to improve students' prosody, intelligibility, and comprehensibility. We're not interested in turning them into native speakers, but we need to make them operational. And there are many offshoots of this research, including enhancing listening comprehension, maximizing fluency, and, believe it or not, enhancing academic writing in L2 learners. But how? Well, the thing is, through the manipulation of the physical auditory signal that learners are exposed to. This is based on the principle that if you provide the brain, and this is the key to the entire thing, and I think I'm starting to run out of time a little bit. This is based on the principle that if you provide the brain with an optimized physical signal, then the brain on its own, without additional work by the student, will do the rest automatically. This principle is part of the verbotonal theory, but has been forgotten and never applied using our protocols in Asian contexts. Did it work? Yes, it worked very well, and has now been extended to some 8 other projects in China, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Australia. Results are published for some, and new results are expected soon. We now need to conduct some large-scale replications, but every project conducted has yielded more than the expected results. Some are surprising. Wherever appropriate possible, a double-blind protocol was applied, which meant that if you had raters rating something, then they didn't know whether they were rating pre-test, post-test, experimental or control groups. That's very, very important. Now, in order to discover more about these phenomena, we're now also conducting instrumental studies scanning the electrical activity of the brain with event-related potentials and blood flow studies using fMRI. These studies are being conducted in China at the moment, and if you're interested, see the presentation by Tsai Chiri on the last day of the conference. This is him and me. I'm not going to play you anything. I don't think I have the time. Okay, it played itself. But we use a process called filtering, where we change the quality of sentences into hello. Okay. Anyway, so here is part of my personal research with my doctoral student. I'll show you quickly because it's kind of fun. And so we're doing brain scans that show certain parts of the brain responding preferentially depending on the kinds of signals. I won't explain them. You can go and listen to the meeting later. So the work that we've been doing has incorporated autonomous learning, personalization of learning, while focusing on perception. In developing these systems, we've discovered two things. In order to learn some things, you don't have to think about what you're doing or trying to learn in order to get good results. Like the old slogan says, you don't have to like it, you just have to do it. In other words, we're moving towards the notion that with good research, some systems can be teacher-less and therefore teacher-proof and essentially automatic. The second thing that we learned somebody's getting very excited about my talk. Hello? All right. Can we, is there some way of reducing the background noise maybe? Thank you. So despite the fact that they did, okay, so let me say, the second thing that we learned was, despite the fact that they did not have to work at what they were doing other than following a routine of activities, in every case, students enjoyed doing the work. They became more autonomous, they were more motivated, and in some cases, they claimed to be less anxious and more confident because they felt that significant improvement in their English had occurred. So instead of worrying about motivation and anxiety, we probably need to focus more on success. And once they are successful, and some of it can be automatic, then we need to, oh my goodness. Okay, Tony, I don't know who Tony is, but could you please switch off your microphone? Okay. So automatic and teacherless systems for learning certain aspects of language are becoming available. It began with pronunciation work, and I'll just show you these names, right? These are people working on them. Lu Thi Mai Vi in Vietnam at the moment, Zhang Xiaobing in China at the moment, he's at the conference, and she's at the conference. Lala Bumela Sudimantara, he is also at the conference today, you can ask them about it. Bi, Yan Yang, Wen Feng Wei are not here, I don't know, maybe they are. And we can use artificial intelligence to help us to develop fully automated systems for things like pronunciation, things which can be done by computers. Now, the result of all this is that we can use teachers in the best possible way, and we can use technology in the best possible way. In the post-COVID period, freeing educational organizations from the necessity to provide classrooms and people is going to be a great move forward. Classrooms and people can be saved for activities that cannot be automatic so far. So just as important, and there are some things that will never be automatic. Just as important that they will give learners opportunities to learn when and where and sometimes how they like. And that's important. It's a good way of increasing the amount of critical support available for language learning at minimal cost, especially in today's mass market. I'm not going to discuss, I'm running out of time, but here are some studies that have all shown the features that I was talking about in terms of autonomy, teacherless learning, teacher-proof learning, and enjoyment and motivation. So where to from here? It is the job of the university to lead intellectually. It is our job to create progress for our profession and to avoid stagnation. Let's work together to generate intellectually valid and valuable learning systems, beginning with research and drawing on the best that each of us has to offer. Research and the best that each of us individually has to offer. And we need to do so humbly, with the understanding that even though we may feel that we know what needs to be done and how to teach, we are all open to new ideas and new evidence of what works and what does not. Maybe we should give serious thought to formalizing our relationships with each other through the formation of one or more international centers so that we can move forward smoothly. In summary, and I'm about to finish, we need to be smart. We need to be forward-looking. We need to be brave. The only reason any of these projects became available, the only reason we arrived at brain scans and brain research and automatic teaching is because one person was brave enough to take up the challenge and do a PhD on it. We need to be active. We need to be visible. We need to be heard. And we need to connect to each other and to decision makers to participate in the creation of the future, and not to portray ourselves as helpless victims of the system. Meetings such as the ones that we're at today really help with that. All of those things. We need to learn to be in control of our work and our situation. That's a magic word, in control. If we do all of that, then the new normal is in our hands, not somebody else's. So let me stop there. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that you will keep some of these things in mind. And if you're worried about teacherless and automatic teachers, and automatic teaching taking jobs away, please don't, because there will be new things for all of us to do. Thank you.